Hi, everyone. I'm Jenna Paone from A Mighty Blaze, and this is our Celebrity Author Spotlight series. Today, we are so excited to have fabulous authors, Beth Keane and Sara Sligar here to speak with us. Hi, guys. How are you doing?
Everybody.
Hello, 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 Facebook sphere. We're so thrilled to be with you today. I'm going to start off by introducing our fabulous authors, and then I'm going to let them take over the conversation. And Sara is going to interview Sara about her new book. First up, Beth Keane. What better introduction for Beth Keane than this quote from Louise Erdrich? Beth Keane takes on one of the most difficult problems in fiction, how to write about human decency. In Ask Again, Yes, Keane makes a compelling case for compassion over blame, understanding over grudge, and the resilience of hearts that can accept the contradictions of love. Beth was awarded a John S. Guggenheim Fellowship for Fiction Writing and has received citations from the National Book Foundation, PEN America, and the Hemingway Society. She is the author of The Walking People, Fever, and her most recent novel, Ask Again, Yes. It spent 8 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. To date, translation rights to Ask Again, Yes have sold in 20 languages, with most translated editions forthcoming in 2020 and 2021. Both Fever and Ask Again, Yes are in development to become limited television series. Yay! Hello, Beth. Thank you.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
And I'm thrilled to introduce Sara now. Sara is our debut author this week. Sara Sligar is the kind of author we get really excited about, a debut. Along with writing exquisite novels, she teaches English and creative writing at the University of Southern California as a postdoctoral fellow in the Society of Fellows. In her spare time, she hangs out with rescue dogs, crafts what she insists is deeply mediocre pottery, which I don't believe at all for a second, Sara. I can't wait to see this. And dreams about going on the TV show Nailed It. Her book, Take Me Apart, was on the most anticipated for Goodreads, Bustle, The Millions, LitHub, and Crime Reads. And the notoriously cranky Kirkus Reviews says of it in a starred review, Sligar delivers an intriguing mystery while tackling big themes, especially sexism and the societal restraints placed on women's bodies and minds. The results are spellbinding, a raw and sophisticated debut. Ladies, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. You two are just phenomenal, and your books speak for themselves, but I'm excited to hear you guys speak. So Beth, I'm going to let you take over.
Okay, thank you, Jenna. I'm going to actually start off script a little bit and ask what Nailed It is. I don't know what that is.
Nailed It is an incredible TV show where people try to recreate like designer cakes in a short amount of time. It's all on Netflix. I'm really desperate to go on because I'm a terrible baker, but I also get a lot of joy out of the show and like seeing people mess up and try to correct themselves.
Oh, okay. I thought it was a construction show, maybe, because Nailed It, you know.
No, I would probably like injure myself if I went on a construction.
Well, that's why it was kind of interesting, but okay. We'll get you there. We'll get you there eventually. So why don't you tell everybody who you are and a little bit about what your book's about.
Yeah, cool. And thanks so much, Beth. I'm very honored to be interviewed by Beth. I love Ask Again, Yes. And I just think you're such an amazing writer, and it's awesome. And thank you, Jenna, for hosting this. So, I mean, Jenna's introduction to, the rescue dogs, the pottery, is pretty much like all the important stuff. But Take Me Apart, which is this, I don't have my hardcover yet. I still only have an advanced copy, actually. But readers have their hardcovers, so if you order a hardcover, you'll get one. But Take Me Apart is a suspense novel about an archivist who becomes obsessed with solving the mystery of a famous photographer's death. And it goes back and forth between the present day, the archivist's perspective, and then the photographer's perspective, which is told through different sort of like archival documents, like diary entries, medical records. There's even like some receipts in there, basically trying to kind of create that feeling of like piecing together a detective story and a mystery through these documents.
Okay, I have to say that we're in this strange time. There are a lot of books coming in. Some need blurbs, some I've ordered. I'm sure you have a huge stack. This book was really one of the brightest lights of this weird time for me. I don't want to say that I didn't know what to expect. I just felt really broken for a start for any, novelist who has a book coming out right now. I have a paperback coming out, but at least my hardcover came out last year, and I've thought about that a lot. So, I talked to the people at A Mighty Blaze, and I got your book, and I was just riveted. I thought it was such a great novel. It had, that propulsive thing that you want a novel to have. There's plot, which I don't think is a dirty word. Sometimes in MFA programs, it is. But it was a wonderfully tightly, sewn, I don't know what the right word is, plot with so much humanity and also such wisdom in it, about, I think, relationships, about feminism, history. It was just so much richer, I guess, than I knew was coming. You know what I mean? And in the end, I was both entertained and moved. And so that's what you want, I think, in a novel. You want to keep turning those pages. So did you always know that you would be a writer, or was it this particular story that got you going and felt like urgent to write?
Well, thank you for saying that. Also, I think it really means a lot to me during this time just to hear that people can see the novel as a little bit of an escape. It does have these darker threads, and like you say, there's like a lot of reflection on gender and power, and creativity, but to feel like that it's immersive or propulsive is just really like the greatest thing. It's a really great compliment, so thank you. I definitely always wanted to be a writer. I've been writing since I was really, really little, as long as I can remember. And I wrote 3 books before this one, 2 like really terrible young adult novels that will never see the light of day. 1 historical romance novel that was actually, I thought, quite good. I signed with my agent on the basis of that, but then we ended up like not even kind of trying to go on submission with it. And instead I ended up writing this book, which was sort of a way for me to incorporate some of the things that I love about genre fiction, like the plot and that just like really gripping and immersive experience of reading with some kind of like deeper or more complex like examinations of character. Not that romance doesn't also sometimes have really complex examinations of character, but there's just more room in this kind of book to like spend time on that.
Yeah, and I think so. That's interesting. That was going to be sort of my next question. If you have always been interested in, I don't even know what to call, like suspense or like a cycle. I wouldn't call it. Are you calling it a thriller? I wouldn't call it a thriller, right?
Yeah, it's very controversial on Goodreads whether or not it's a thriller, which, I guess it's good to have like a little bit of argument. I only feel bad if people go into it expecting something that's very like, tons of like dead bodies piling up and like, very high octane. It's not that kind of thriller. I do think that, hopefully it has that kind of like absorptive quality of it. But it's definitely, yeah, I would say like in the crime suspense genre, sort of like psychological suspense, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, the suspense is definitely there. It's funny though, a lot of this is marketing, right? Which is what a lot of readers don't know. My second novel, they wanted to describe as a thriller in the UK for their marketing purposes. And I have absolutely nothing against thrillers. I love them, but this just wasn't a thriller. And so I was imagining reviews where people would say, this is the worst thriller I've ever read. And I'm like, but it wasn't a thriller. So, once it gets past a certain stage, some of this gets really there are a lot of gray areas that you have to negotiate.
Yeah, definitely. There is a lot of stuff that's out of your control as an author. I will say the thing that I like about calling it a thriller is that I do think that a lot of readers came into it expecting one thing and maybe like were a little bit surprised or like tried something new. And I think it's like a tangential enough to the genre that they're not like completely disappointed. But I've heard from readers that they're like, oh, like I wish this wasn't called a thriller, but then the thriller is why I picked it up. And so, and I ended up really loving it. So I think like there's pluses and minuses because I don't want to let readers down, but it's also nice to be able to like push the boundaries of genre a little bit.
It's interesting that you say that you wrote a romance novel before this, because one of the things I admired in this book is you are very good at writing sex. A lot of the, I've read a couple of interviews and I know that that's not exactly the headline of the book, but it's a really hard thing to write. And there was suspense in that central romantic relationship too. And so I wonder, so that makes more sense. I mean, not that we all shouldn't be able to write whatever well, but I thought you were particularly good at that. Another thing, now that I'm on a roll, that is hard to write, I think, is a portrait of an artist. I don't know if you agree, but I think capturing an artist in fiction is surprisingly difficult. You have to decide whether the artist is, like good or not good. And then you kind of have to convince the reader that those things are true by describing work that the reader may not like. And so maybe, but you pulled it off. Can you talk about that a little bit? Were you afraid of that part of things?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it was tricky. There were maybe a lot of things with this book that, like, if I were going to write it again now, I might not have been like brave enough to do, like the whole like archival I don't think I realized how hard it would be to tell a mystery through like archival documents, for example. And I didn't like fear writing about the photographs. Miranda, the photographer, is like a very famous artist and like known for these really controversial photographs. I didn't fear writing about them, but I do think, yeah, I spent a lot of time thinking about what would be a good way to convey that this art was meaningful and like what its sort of possible interpretations or impact were. One thing that I did kind of settle on that I think might be useful if anyone else is, trying to write an artist character is that I think often if I read books about artists, there's a tendency to be like, oh, well, they only do like one thing and they kind of just keep doing one thing as the character of the artist. And I don't think that's actually how a lot of artists or writers operate. There's always going to be a lot of variation as artists develop and grow. So even though there are some like central themes of Miranda's work, I wanted her different like photo series to be quite different and to have different feelings so that you could see that kind of like evolution. And I think that helped create, I think that helped it feel a little bit more realistic to me because it made it seem like she was a person who was producing art rather than just sort of like a symbol of an artist.
Yeah, that totally came through. What about the archival part of things? Do you know a lot about that?
Yeah, so I'm also an academic. I have a master's in history and a PhD in English, and my research in English is like very focused on like historical analysis, mostly around like the 1950s. And so I've spent a ton of time in archives, and that was like really one of the central starting points of the book was wanting to kind of communicate that sort of feverish, like addictive detective quality of it, and think about how that was similar to or different from the sort of detective work that is talked about in crime fiction. So at the beginning, I also had this stream of, I was like, oh, like I want people to really feel like how boring it can be in archives. And then I eventually realized, I was like, nobody wants to read a boring book. Like that's not an emotion that people go into books wanting to read. So I had to figure out a way to like convey theoretically how one might be bored without boring the reader. I took some license with the representation of the archives there to make it more interesting. But other than that, I did draw a lot of my like experience working with documents and my kind of interest in just thinking about like what can we actually know about someone from their documents, what kinds of proof does a letter or a record give us, like what does that actually prove?
Yeah, I mean, you did the opposite. You made me think it's the perfect job for a nosy person.
Yes, I'm a very nosy person, so that's probably why I really like it. Yeah.
That's a great trait for a researcher to have. I said that's a great trait for a researcher to have.
Yeah.
And that's one of those ways it seems like you were able to make it interesting while getting across how difficult this is to do, that attention to detail.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, I am fundamentally like interested in archives and not bored by them. So hopefully that comes through a little bit. And I think, often with writing fiction, you're wanting to like turn the volume up on something that you sort of feel or think about. And I wanted to like take that kind of addictive quality or feel of being in the archives, and then just like turn it up a notch. And that's kind of what Kate, the archivist, ends up feeling and experiencing.
And I think anytime she got bored, she went off and did things sort of off book, which is why we liked her.
Yeah.
She's only supposed to limit herself to one area without giving away anything. But she, if she saw a path, she just followed it, and so did we. And we were happy to see her do that, although it made us nervous at times, at least this year.
Yes, she doesn't have like the greatest like archival ethics. So,
Yeah.
but that's what makes it interesting.
But never have one of these people in your house because they'll be snooping around. Did it make you think about my agent made a joke once, no one is going to want my papers ever, but about texts, he's like, watch those texts, you're gonna, and it made me think about, reading your book, how archives are going to look different, 50, 60, 70 years from now, and how we'll probably have nothing, either we'll have a lot, although how do you get digital access? Or we'll have, I've kept no drafts of any book I've written. I don't know if my friends have or if other people do. But have you thought about that? Like how things will change and what sort of access an archivist will need in the future?
Yeah, I mean, to put on my like researcher hat for a second, I will say that in, like in academia, if you're working on like literary history, as someone who works in the 20th century, my issues are completely different from the issues of like someone who works on like 16th century documents. Like their problem is like they can never find new documents, right? Like and if you find a new document, like that's amazing. You could find like a new grocery list from like 1520 and it would be like front page news in the medievalist world.
Yeah.
In the 20th century, sorry, what?
Like instant tenure.
Yeah, exactly. Like, ta-da. In the 20th century, it really is hard to find new things in terms of like something that genuinely has never been looked at. But there's just such a vast quantity that you like sifting through it, trying to like put it together, create an argument out of it. There are things that go missing because they're just lost in this like vast sort of like trove of data and things like that. So that is, just an issue in archives and thinking about archives overall. I have heard that like, I think like Salman Rushdie like donated his like hard drive of something to a library somewhere, which I thought was interesting because I was like, the physical hard drive actually isn't really that meaningful. Like it's like the files that are on it. So I don't know like how people are going to, in terms of like preserving papers and like best practices. I'm sure there are a lot of historians and archivists who are figuring out, and librarians who are figuring out good ways.
We'll have to be like, here's the cloud there.
Yeah, exactly. Like here you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. The romance gets lost though in that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And so when I was writing and like choosing, what time period to set it in, I knew it had to be kind of analog time period in order to have that sort of like materiality that I wanted to like highlight and draw out.
Not to get too academic, but there's also it seemed to me like a clear link. It's, there's a comment on feminism that is a line throughout this book and between Miranda's story. She's the artist. She's the one for readers who lives and works and is famous in the 70s. And Kate, who is the archivist. And it made me think about how much has changed, certainly, but also how much has not, in the present day. Sort of the double standard that Miranda went through, expectations were different, it seemed, for her husband, who was also an artist, than they were for her and for other male artists. And for Kate, it didn't look the same, but there were common elements. Is that something that must have been something that you thought about a lot while you were writing?
Yeah, I wanted there, to be these parallels and similarities. I didn't want it to be like a kind of progressive history, as we would say in academia, of like, oh, like women's things get better. There are some things that are like easier to access for Kate. There are also some things that, it's sad to think about like how little has changed also in even 25 or 30 years. So that was something I thought a lot about. Also, you know, an interesting thing that I've heard from a few readers is like, they're like, oh, this is like very obviously like a post Me Too novel, which is interesting because I was editing it and working on it during Me Too. What?
Who said that? A man?
I think men and women have both said it. Yeah. But it's like, I guess it's just interesting because I do think that, you know, the Me Too movement happening gave me license to like talk about Kate's experiences in a slightly different way, the present day protagonist. But Miranda's experiences were like very much the same from like when I started writing it. And in fact, the like post Me Too era, like I find it to be like a bit of a weird, because these issues have been around for a really long time, and also women have been talking about them for a really long time. It's just sort of like the entrance into like the media sphere, and honestly it's a lot of like men becoming more aware of them that that is really like what people are talking about when they say that. Not to minimize the importance of the movement at all, but I do think that a lot of the issues and the nuances of power and the way that it's exercised upon women or by women, I think those have remained like constant in a lot of ways.
Yeah, the shock and surprise of all this is only on one side. I don't think.
Right, exactly. Yeah, like, you know, when people started posting Me Too on Twitter, I was like, yeah, of course. Like, no woman I know was surprised that so many people had had these experiences, you know?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing when you see this popping up now, and it's there in not just real life, but in art for so long, and it's all of a sudden we're talking about it in a totally different way. But it is interesting to see a story where, you know, you're able to compare those two experiences of women living in different times.
Yeah, right.
This is so wonderful. Guys, I have a question for both of you, if you don't mind, from our chat commenters. They want to know, are you finding time to write right now? And if so, how and energy, given everything that's going on? I would love to hear from both of you on how you're managing, if you're writing, if you're not, and it's okay either way. This will not be a judgment. We're just interested. I think people are maybe looking for a little inspiration if you've found any.
I was writing a lot in the beginning. So, you know, week one, I'm like, you know, I'm going to use this time to write and then I don't know, some sort of like sense of dread took over and I found it really hard to write. I was having to revert to old habits, like from when my kids were really little, of getting up at 5 a.m. And it kind of, I don't know, I felt like furious that I was in this position again. I'm like, I have to get up at 5 a.m. again and like do this whole. So then I didn't write for a couple of weeks. I think in my head, I told myself this is all going to end pretty soon, you know, and so I'll read a lot, I'll I'll do other things. But then it hit me like 2 weeks ago that this is not going to end anytime soon. So I don't know. I think I'm such a head case. I am writing. It's like uneven. I don't know if it's any good, but I am managing to write. Yes. How about you, Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's interesting also, you know, like the book coming out just this week, there's been a lot of stuff like leading up to it. So in some ways, there's been a lot of like other reasons not to write. I have been trying to write because I also feel like for me, it's just something that is that helps me. I also, you know, I don't have children at home. So I don't have some of the like pressures during the day that my job is at USC. And so I don't have like a 9 to 5 exactly. So I have a lot more flexibility. So I will say, I think that's really important in order to be able to write. But I don't think that I'm certainly not writing as productively or quickly. But it's hard for me. I'm working on like a draft of my next book, and it's just hard for me to tell what parts of it are difficult because like writing first drafts is really difficult, or difficult because I like can't write in this like stressful situation. So it's just, I feel very confused a lot of the time, honestly.
You guys sound awesome. You sound like you're killing it. I mean, that's like confusion on a good day for me is like a win. I'm like, if I write something that I think is terrible on a day, I'm like, okay, you know what? That's a win for today.
The standards feel lower, right? Like I'm like, you know what? It happened, sort of.
Yeah. But then I get into a panic. It takes me, I feel like so long. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to come out of this like I won't have another book for 10 years if I don't get on it, you know? And so I think I lie to myself so much. I like tell myself reasons why I can't write. And so I have to examine whether I'm lying to myself or not. You know, drafting is always hard. But for you, I said this to my friend who has a memoir out this week, and she was, you know, saying how busy she is with everything. And it just messes with your head, right? The publication process, and you're constantly searching for things. And I think the good thing for the position you're in, Sarah, is that you probably wouldn't be writing that much anyway, even if
Yeah.
the world were normal. So that would comfort me if I were in your position. But me, I've been banging this drum for a year. I really should be writing, you know?
You know what the great thing is? At least right now we have the comfort of wonderful books like yours, both of you, that we're able to keep us company and, you know, sustain us until we're able to move through this. Oh, one more question, sorry, before we go. And then I think I'll maybe ask Mary Beth for maybe a final question for Sarah. And this is one more audience question. It's, is this COVID experience making you feel like your work is more or less significant? And is there a different direction that this experience is pushing you in? That's kind of a loaded question. And I'm sure that maybe, yes. Oh yeah, for both of you.
I was hoping it was only for Sarah.
I'll answer it first because Mary Beth took the last one first. So I feel it's only fair for me to have to answer it first. I don't really have an answer, unfortunately. I think it's very difficult as a writer to assess the significance of your work at any given time anyway. And, you know, I do think, you know, there's been a lot of stuff about like books being essential. I do think books are important, but I also think, you know, there's so much happening right now that I think it's okay to feel like, you know, if you're having trouble reading or like focusing in on reading, that's okay. If you're like loving reading and getting that escape, like that's also okay. I honestly, I feel like I'm like too in the middle of it to really have any kind of wisdom or thought about that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I can't comment on my own work. I have no idea whether it's significant or not, but I do think in this weird time, when I'm reading, if I'm reading something that I really love, I mean, some things I haven't just been able to focus on, I don't know why, but if I really read something I love and connect with, it does feel extra important right now when we're not seeing any other human beings, you know, to remember that there's like a common humanity. I think that's why we're all loving these like videos of whole cities clapping and blowing their horns and cheering on essential workers. I think it's why we love my kids' school sends out these like cheesy little videos of the teachers doing TikToks, and they make me, I don't know why, but I want to like bawl every time I see them. And so when I read a book I love, then you feel like we're all together in something, we'll get through this. You know, it's not quite that on the surface of my consciousness, but you know, I do think, I don't know if mine are essential, but I do think books and stories are essential right now more than ever.
That's so well said. It sustains us, you know, it gets us through.
Yeah, I agree. There's a hope and like a connectivity that comes with reading and really connecting with something.
It's being in that mental space of somebody else, you know, it's such a close connection. It's so, you know, that's why it's so wonderful to have these engrossing books by authors like yourselves that really are able to pull you out. I mean, how amazing. Like, I keep thinking about what Mary Beth said at the beginning of this interview about what a bright spot, Sarah, your book brought to her. And how amazing is it that with all of this going on, that was able to happen and your book did that? Like, that's very significant to me. That's so cool. You guys are amazing. You're fabulous. Thank you so much for being here. Mary Beth, do you have any last questions for Sarah? Or Sarah, do you have any last questions you want to ask Mary Beth? Should we turn it around, or I don't want to put you on the spot.
I was going to ask Sarah, I did a little sleuthing on the internet before we started this, and I'd heard her somewhere else talk about the Take Me Apart challenge.
Yes.
The social media thing that sounds like, you know, if you're looking for something fun to do during this time, I think it sounded pretty cool. You want to describe it?
Yeah, so the Take Me Apart challenge is just an opportunity for everyone to find like a document in their house. It could be like a childhood diary or an old photo or really anything material, anything that's like a little bit like what Kate might find in Miranda's archives in my book. And you just like post a video or a photo of yourself explaining it or telling its story. And if you tag me and you hashtag Take Me Apart challenge on May 8th, I'm going to choose my 4 favorites and put it up to a vote on Instagram. And then the winner is going to get a gift certificate. So really it could be like funny, serious, it can be anything you want. It's just like an opportunity for us to sort of like share the stories that we've made around or through these different documents that you have lying around.
That sounds really cool.
That sounds so fun to dig up some old journals from like middle school and look at all the ridiculous.
Yes, I posted a video of myself reading a truly embarrassing entry from my 10-year-old diary. So like I went there, it's really embarrassing. And so people should feel free to look at that and feel inspired.
Oh, I am gonna rush out.
Sorry.
Sorry, no, that's essential. We gotta get to Sarah's embarrassing story. And is that on your Instagram? That's on
It's
your
on my Instagram, yes, which is just my first and last name.
Yep, and I want to remind everybody out there to please follow Mary Beth Keane and Sara Sligar on Instagram and Twitter, and on Facebook. We'll have links to their pages. We'll also have links to their websites, their books where you can purchase them, and we're also going to have some links to their favorite bookstores. I know one of Mary Beth Keane's favorite bookstores is Books and Greetings in New Jersey, and one of Sara Sligar's favorite indie stores is Skylight Books, who we featured yesterday with Janet Fitch as well. And she also has let us know that there are some autographed copies at the Poison Pen in Arizona. And I know it's really hard for authors to get autographed copies to readers right now, but if you're looking for an autographed copy, check out the Poison Pen and they can probably ship one to you. And thank you, ladies, so much for being here. We really appreciate it. I'm Jenna Paone from A Mighty Blaze. This is our Celebrity Spotlight. And we have another one coming up at 4 p.m. with Hank Philippi Ryan and Lise Wheel. And thank you, ladies, so much again.
Thanks for having us. This was fun.
Thank you so much. This was the best. Thanks, Mary Beth. Thanks, Jenna.
Thank you all. Have a great day.